You're listening to Docs Outside the Box, episode 25.
Welcome to Docs Outside the Box podcast. This is your official show, looking inside the minds of cutting-edge and innovative doctors. Think you'll find these stories in any medical textbook? Sorry, you're getting real life insight from men and women pushing the envelope beyond medicine. Ordinary doctors doing extraordinary things. Let's start now with your host, Dr. Nee Darko.
This episode of Docs Outside the Box is brought to you by Equal Access Health. Created for doctors, by doctors, Equal Access Health was established with the specific goal of improving a doctor's quality of life, all while providing continuous quality care for patients. We offer competitive rates for doctors and low costs for employers. We're not your average locums company. Besides using the latest in technology, we provide our docs with resources to help manage finances as an independent contractor. Worried about taxes, health insurance, investments, debt payoff, or even savings? EAH has got you covered. At EAH, you're more than just a locum, you're a colleague. To learn more about EAH locums, visit us at www.equalaccesshealth.net or email us at info@equalaccesshealth.net. What's good, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of Docs Outside the Box. Not just any episode. This is episode 25, and you are listening to the Doc Outside the Box. My name is Dr. Nee Darko, and before we get on to our next great episode, our next great interview, I just want to take a quick moment just to say thank you all for listening to the show, subscribing to the show, telling everybody that you know about the show, and it has grown from humble beginnings to where we are right now, from literally crickets to where I can't keep up with the amount of demand that people either want to be on the show or people are looking for more episodes. And it's a really good problem to have. And for those who are thinking about doing something similar, all you need literally is one mic and a laptop. And I have recorded everywhere from the airport to an Amtrak train to even more weirder places. But we won't get into that right now. But before we go into our next interview, I just want to take a quick moment, as always, just to read a couple of 5-star reviews from iTunes. So this week's 5-star review is from APAD007, which starts with, "This is the best podcast ever." And it says, "This is such an inspiring podcast. Every episode is better than the last. I just got into medical school, and Dr. Darko has made me realize that the medical field has countless opportunities in addition to being physicians. We only get one life, so let's make it count and live outside the box. Thank you again for all you do, Dr. Darko. I can't thank you enough." APAD007. Yeah, you may not want to use 007 while you're in med school, but nonetheless, I love the feedback. Thank you so much for leaving a very nice 5-star review for me. The next one is by Alston16. This is a phenomenal podcast. That's the title. It says, "It has taken me way too long to leave a review. I started listening to this podcast around last fall, and as a first-year medical student, this podcast has opened my eyes to the wide breadth of opportunities for doctors outside of clinical medicine. Thank you, Dr. Darko, for taking your time to interview all of these inspiring people. I am very excited for my future." Well, thank you very much, man. I'm going to continue to give you great guests, and I'm glad that you're really having a good time with the show. And to everybody else, please, if you have not left a iTunes review, please just take a couple of moments, a couple of minutes just to log in, leave me a very good review. If you don't like it, don't leave me too good of a review. It doesn't matter. As you've known in the past, I've read pretty critical feedback, and all in all, I read feedback that I can either learn from or feedback that's obviously reassuring, but I also read feedback that's not so positive also. So either way, always feel free to reach out to me, either through Twitter, through Facebook, through email, and obviously through iTunes, Google Play, and Stitcher Radio. So on to our next great guest. If you have not heard of this website, you are definitely living under a rock. You are definitely not living outside the box. But today you're going to get a chance to hear from one of the leading physician voices in social media. And on this website, you normally get things or people talking about the effects on our current healthcare system, not only just for our patients, but also for our country, for health policy, and also its effects on doctors. Dr. Kevin Poe is the man, the myth, the legend behind the juggernaut, the website Kevin MD. And, this website started off in 2004 to very humble beginnings. And this is during the very early days of blogging. I'm talking about pre-Web 2.0. This is, before Facebook became Facebook, obviously way before Instagram, way before Snapchat. And Dr. Poe was an early adopter of this format when he noticed that he would write posts, write his reviews on certain things, and that his patients, when they came into clinic, they would actually, comment on how well they liked his posts. And that's when he knew that he had something going on, because he felt at that point that he could, speak very honestly about, certain things, whether it's, certain medications or, just in general, the healthcare system, and that it could directly reach his patients and they can comment on that. He figured that he was onto something, and that this would be a powerful medium, not just for him, but also for other physicians. And ultimately, the goal was to create a forum where doctors who are on the front line could share their stories, whether it's positive, whether it's negative, whether it's frustrations. And he's been able to accomplish that. And over the next, 12 or 13 years, his website has grown to a point where now it has over 3 million page views, over 250,000 followers on both Facebook and Twitter. I need him to teach me how he's been able to do that. And currently right now he has over 1,000 healthcare providers who are actually contributing to the website. And obviously, with all of the stats that I just gave you, with all of that history, it is no surprise that Kevin MD, the website, was named the web's top social media influencer in both healthcare and medicine. Many times his site gets cited actually by other electronic and print media like Forbes, the New York Times, CNN, the Wall Street Journal. And there are so many topics that you can get on his website. There's everything from healthcare informational technology to the Affordable Care Act to topics on physician burnout. You'll even get sample mix-up questions on there. So, basically Kevin MD is a one-stop shop for basically frontline physicians who are looking to either find their voice or find other voices that are very similar in an often very crowded healthcare debate. He is a very busy man. Besides running the website, he's also a co-author of the book, Establishing, Managing, and Protecting Your Online Reputation, a social media guide for physicians and medical practices. Look, I feel very lucky to have a chance to interview him because he's so very busy, not only with his website and with the numerous public engagements that he's in, but also he's practicing. He's an internal medicine physician. So things that I want you to pick up from this episode are: find out who manages his website and who curates the majority of his blog posts. I want you to learn how he handles posts or viewpoints on his site that he actually disagrees with. You're also going to hear about his recommendations on social media for physicians and how to get started as a physician in social media. You'll also get an interesting take. I think this is going to be really interesting, where he gives his thoughts on TV medical journalists, and he gets to talk about if there are any similarities or differences between these medical journalists and what he does. You'll also learn how saying no serves as his biggest life hack to productivity. And of course, as with all my guests, we're going to learn how he answers #I'm not just a doc. So without further ado, I present Dr. Kevin Poe. Back at it again with another episode of Docs Outside the Box. I'm extremely excited, honored to have social media's leading physician voice, Dr. Kevin MD, also known as Dr. Kevin Poe. Dr. Kevin Poe, Dr. Kevin MD, welcome to Docs Outside the Box.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So, I've been following you. I've been a fan of your website for at least 5 years now. I discovered it while I was in my last year of residency. And, Before we get too much into the nitty gritty of your website, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. I'm an internal medicine physician. I've been practicing medicine for about 15 years now. I went to school at Boston University School of Medicine, and I stayed there for residency at Boston Medical Center. And I moved to Nashua, New Hampshire, which is about 45 minutes north of Boston, and joined a hospital-owned practice. So there are a total of 4 of us, and I've been there ever since. I have 2 young daughters that raising here. It's a great place to raise a family. And obviously, between that and speaking and managing Kevin MD, all my plates are pretty full at the moment.
It's a pretty tough juggling act.
Absolutely, but obviously, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing.
So you are practicing full time right now?
Not quite full time.
Okay.
I practice 3/4 time. I still see patients 4 days a week, and it's a tremendous balance between keeping my feet in clinical medicine, yet maintaining the Kevin MD, as well as going across the country and speaking to other doctors. So right now I'm in a pretty good place when it comes to balancing my various professional interests as well as those of my family.
Can you tell us when Kevin MD started, why it started also?
Sure. So Kevin MD started back in the spring of 2004, and there wasn't any master plan, obviously. I started a blog on Blogger, which is still there.
That's a long time ago.
It is still a long time ago, and it's a free site where obviously people can write posts, hit publish, and the world can see it. And I remember writing a post on Vioxx, that anti-inflammatory medicine that eventually was recalled by Merck, and I wrote some things that patients can do if they're on Vioxx, because I had a lot of patients on Vioxx. And I remember a few days after writing that blog, I walked into the exam room with a patient, and she said, "Thank you very much, Dr. Poe. I read your blog post this morning." And at that moment, I realized that I can't believe that someone other than my mother was reading my blog, that patients can be reading it as well. So I realized then that blogs and, of course, other forms of social media were tremendous mediums where doctors can share information, can connect with their colleagues outside of the exam room. Instead of speaking to patients one-to-one in the exam room, we now can speak to many people at once on a social media platform like a blog. And certainly it's evolved and grown since then as we have more social media platforms available to us.
So when did you know that this was a hit? This is something that needs further attention. How did you know that you hit that point?
I think that once I hear feedback, not only from patients, but from other doctors as well, I think it wasn't until several years after I've been doing this where I have more and more patients finding me online. More and more patients, of course, are Googling their doctors. And when I see new patients, I'm finding an increasing proportion say, "Hey, you know what? I found you because of your blog. I found you because I Googled you and your blog came up and your Facebook post came up and your Twitter presence came up." I also got a lot of response from those in the medical profession as well. Got a lot of feedback saying, "You know what, thank you for sharing your story," or "Thank you for sharing some of the challenges that other doctors are describing, because I'm going through that too." And just reading connections between me, patients as well as my fellow clinicians, that's really when I knew that, hey, I really had something here. There isn't and really any major site where physicians can share their stories so honestly and openly, and also patients can leave their feedback. So having that social media forum where we can connect both patients and doctors, that's when I realized that I really had something. And it wasn't until I was doing this for at least several years after I started.
Okay. So when you first started, it was mainly your voice that was on the site. And then eventually, did you start allowing other doctors to post?
That's correct. For the first few years, it was just my voice on the site. I was trying to find out what my voice was, what I wanted to say. I did feel that not only could doctors educate and connect and guide patients to better sources of health information, I thought that it was important for physicians to share their own stories as well. Because whenever you read about what doctors say in mainstream media, on the New York Times editorial page, or on television, a lot of them, they're not frontline physicians. They're not talking about concerns that matter to frontline physicians because a lot of them, they don't practice themselves. So I thought it was important to have a forum where frontline physicians who see patients every day share their stories, share some of the challenges and frustrations they face every day. And as the site became more prominent, it did become a platform where these doctors can share their stories. So now I have several thousand healthcare voices on my site, mostly physicians, but also medical students. I have nurse practitioners, physician assistants, and of course patients. They also use that platform really to share their stories. And these are stories that you don't often read in other mainstream media outlets. And it really provides that unique window that you can't find anywhere else.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. Now, who manages your website now?
So primarily it's me. I solicit articles from a group of other healthcare blogs, but I also have unsolicited posts as well. And I sift through all of them, anywhere between 50 to 75 a day in terms of...
How do you find time to do all that?
Yeah, so it's definitely a challenge, but obviously it's a passion of mine too. And if I didn't believe in it, if I didn't believe in the power of the platform and what I do, obviously I wouldn't be doing this. So I wake up pretty early in the morning, sometimes 4:35 in the morning, and I do work on my site, whether it's editing or curating, and then I go see patients, and then after that, I pick up my kids, do homework with them, it's family time, and then after my kids sleep, then I also resume working on the site. So anywhere between 4 to 5 hours per day, and obviously more on the weekends. But it's definitely a passion of mine, and obviously I wouldn't be doing it if I didn't believe in it. I also have an editorial assistant who also helps me do some of the editing, and I also have a technical team behind the site, because as the site has grown, it has various technical challenges that have to do with scaling, and that's obviously out of my area of expertise. So I do have a team behind me, but in terms of the direction, the voice, and what goes on the site, I definitely have my hands on that.
So it appears, on the site, the posts are they vary. You have posts that don't seem so controversial. There are posts that are very controversial. Have you ever had an opportunity to post things that you don't agree with?
Absolutely. So, if you know a little bit of, if you talk to me, one of the beliefs that I have is that when it comes to big problems, and obviously there are a lot of problems in healthcare, I do think that we need to take ideas from across the political spectrum. So I do think that we need to take more progressive and more conservative ideas when it comes to solving the problems in our healthcare. And obviously we live in such a polarized society, and I think it's very difficult to hear each other's voices. I think each side lives in a bubble. So what I try to do on my side is that I try to take voices from across the political spectrum, and that's why I do post some pieces that are controversial to the other side, but then I try to balance that with viewpoints that take the opposite view as well. Because I think that in order for us to learn from each other, we need to be exposed to ideas that may seem a little bit uncomfortable. Because ultimately, if we are to solve the many problems that we have in healthcare, we do need to take ideas from both sides of the political spectrum. So the answer to your question is yes, I absolutely do post stories that sometimes I personally disagree with, but I do think that they are important voices that need to be heard.
Now, you're going through, like you said, about 50 to 70 posts a day. I'm sure you're getting contacted with different doctors, different authors who want to post on your site. Do you have like a list of favorite, posters or up and coming authors who you always kind of look forward to getting their posts?
I do. So I think that there are a lot of blogs that certainly I follow, and they're on my RSS feed. And for those people who still use RSS, I still use RSS, and I follow what they write on their site. And we have an agreement where I can periodically cross post some of their posts on my site. And and I do have some authors who send me posts weekly on a weekly basis, and I'm certainly looking forward to what they have to say. And they're not just primary care physicians, but they're physicians in all kinds of specialties, because the challenges that face doctors aren't unique to a primary care physician or a surgeon or an orthopedist. I think these are challenges that face all of us, and there are themes that recur on my site that a lot of doctors can identify with. So yes, I do have regular authors who post on my site, and some of the responses to their pieces are fascinating, and the conversation they started are genuinely illuminating, and sometimes really can flesh out a topic and really can start off a really provocative discussion.
Can I push you a little bit? Can you
Sure.
Can you name some of them, or?
Sure. Let me just
off the top of the head.
Sure. Well, I can just go, take a look at some recent posts on my site. So I think that there is a physician, Rob Lamberts, who used to be who still is a primary care physician, who a few years ago went into the direct care medicine route, kind of a cash only direct care medicine route. So he tells his stories about the transition that he made from more corporate medicine to a more independent direct pay route. So I think that's certainly interesting stories that he tells. Pamela Weibel is a family physician in Oregon, and she's one of the leading authorities when it comes to clinician burnout and clinician mental health. And I think that her stories and her voices are tremendously important, because I'm sure we may be talking about this later, but I think that issues like physician burnout, physician suicide, these aren't issues that often get talked about in mainstream media, and she really highlights a lot of this, with the underbelly of medicine, some of the challenges that we face, and really puts a strong spotlight on that. So I like to highlight her voice and her stories and really get the conversation started there. So, scrolling through my site, I post about 6 to 8 voices a day, and a lot of them really tell some illuminating stories.
Now, you mentioned direct cash, direct primary care. What are your thoughts on doctors doing more shift work, or even doing locums, or, like you said, doing more concierge medicine? Because to me, these are all efforts where doctors are taking, control, either with their lifestyle, with how they get paid, or both. What are your thoughts on that type of medicine?
No, I think there's certainly a place for that. I certainly think that there are a lot of pros when it comes to direct pay medicine. They want to get the insurance companies out of the way. There's obviously less paperwork, less bureaucracy, because one of the complaints that I have and many other primary care doctors have is that there's just too many check boxes to click off. We're dealing with these antiquated electronic medical records. We have to do with pre-authorizations, and we spend more time behind a computer rather than seeing patients. There was a study in the Annals of Internal Medicine a few months ago that found that for every hour that we spend with patients, we spend another 2 hours behind a computer doing charts or doing paperwork. So I think that those doctors who branch off and do this more direct care business, I think that they're taking matters in their own hands. So the bigger question is whether this is a sustainable model on a whole, and that's really in question, because I think that it certainly fills a niche. I think patients are certainly conditioned that their insurance covers a lot of things, and why do I have to pay out of my pocket for direct care medicine, no matter what, no matter how reasonable the fees are. So I think that there is a certain mindset that works against the direct pay physician. So I do think it feels a niche. Whether it can expand to a more mainstream market, that's certainly still in question.
So let's take a step back to social media. So for docs who are listening right now, or anybody in medicine right now who's kind of hesitant to really jump all into social media, do you have any recommendations on how they should be using social media? Any recommendations on the time that they should be spending on social media?
It all starts with what your goals are. You can't jump into social media just for the sake of jumping into social media. You can't do social media just to make money. I think that there needs to be a defined goal why you want to use social media. Do you want to use social media to connect with and educate patients? Do you want to use social media to connect with and learn from your colleagues? Do you want to use social media to advocate for a cause or debate healthcare reform? So you need a specific goal in mind before you go into social media. And then there are platforms that best fit those goals. So that's my biggest piece of advice, is that before you jump in, ask yourself, why are you doing this and what's your ultimate goal? And then you can fit those social media pieces around that goal.
And it seems nowadays, at least, from my experience, that a lot of doctors right now are into branding, and they're on social media, whether it's Facebook and Twitter, Instagram, and putting out some messages either through Instagram or Facebook, and they're putting messages out there that, not only educates patients, but also kind of highlights their own brand. So it's very interesting to see how this is going to end up in 2, 3, maybe even 5 years, to the point where they're putting out so much posts. It's almost to the point where people are starting to, have jobs that are involved of being a social media manager just to help physicians and other people who are trying to brand themselves. What are your thoughts on that? Do you recommend getting like a social media manager?
So for general practices who want to get into social media, most physicians want to get into social media because they want to connect with patients. There's a lot of bad information out online, so sometimes they want to go on Facebook to maybe share some reputable posts, talk about what they're doing in clinic. So a lot of doctors, when I go across the country to talk to them, they say they don't have time for this, and can I hire a social media manager? I certainly think that's fine, especially if you're not versed in social media. But I always think that it's important for physicians to have their own voice come through. Because if they outsource their posts, I think you lose some of the authenticity. And I think a lot of patients, they genuinely want to hear what their doctors have to say. So I always advise doctors, try to write posts if you can. And if you're not a good writer, then do video, because what do you do every day in the exam room? You talk to patients every day. You advise them every day. You counsel them every day. And if you just videotape yourself and do a Facebook video, you could do a Facebook live chat, you could have a YouTube channel. These are things that you do every day in the exam room. So I think there are plenty of ways for physicians to create authentic content. And I always think that's always better than outsourcing it. Obviously, if you don't have the time and outsourcing it is your only option, that's fine. It's better than nothing. But given the choice, I always advise physicians to try to create that content on their own.
Now, you get to travel a lot and you do a lot of public speaking. Tell us about your first gig. What was it like when you got your first invitation to go and speak about what you do with Kevin MD?
So that was back in 2008. And when I was doing my site, so the 2008, so that was about 4 years after Kevin MD started. And I knew I had something because I got the attention of various newspapers. And at that time, it was a pretty novel concept. You had this doctor who was blogging, and there are fewer than probably 50 bloggers in the country at that time. And at that time, I was a novel concept. And I knew I had a story there. And then I started getting invitations to tell my story, and I thought to myself, I really should have my story ready and talk about something that not many other physicians are doing. So my first gig was at the New England Journal of Medicine. I think it was a physician recruiting conference, and let me say, it was
pretty big revenue already.
It was compared to what I'm doing now, it was pretty rough. Yeah. But I remember watching a lot of YouTube videos about other keynotes, other speakers, and what they did, and try to adapt my story into that framework. Because I'm pretty comfortable speaking, but when speaking in high school or college is different from speaking to a group of your colleagues. So I think that I got through it. It was fine, but obviously knowing what I know now, it was pretty rough. But I think that's the only way to get better, obviously, is to actually just go ahead and do it, get the feedback and improve. And I think one thing that I'm sure that in medicine is that whatever is trend setting in current industries, it takes a few years before it becomes relevant in healthcare, right? Healthcare is always like 3 to 4 years behind the times. Absolutely. So I looked at how social media applied to leadership, how social media applied to technology, how social media applied to the media, and I looked at some of the thought leaders in other areas, and I see how they were leveraging their social media platforms into a keynote speech, how they were sharing their story, and I watched a lot of obviously TED Talks and videos about what these leaders were doing, and I tried to adapt some of those techniques into my own social media story. So over the years, it's obviously evolved, and my speaking style has grown a lot since 2008. But it's tremendously exciting. It's not something that you teach in medical school. It's given me so many opportunities to meet doctors and medical students across the country, to listen to their stories, to hear some of the challenges they face, and really share some of the benefits and enlightenment that I've had in social media, and the sharing it on the stage is tremendously exhilarating.
I've always wanted to know this, and I've talked to my wife about it. I've talked to other doctors, and it's now that I have you actually on this phone, on this line, I want to know, like, do you consider yourself to be kind of sort of like a medical journalist? Like, I've always wanted to know if you thought yourself to be among contemporaries like Dr. Oz, the doctor, Sanjay Gupta. Do you consider them to be like at the same level, or do you consider yourself doing something completely different?
Well, I certainly don't have the same publicity platform that they have. Obviously, Sanjay Gupta, Dr. Oz, they have significantly bigger platforms than I do, and obviously a lot of them, they have more credentials. In the case of especially Dr. Gupta, he does plenty of great things. So from a credential standpoint and from a platform standpoint, I have nowhere near the amount of credibility that they have. Do I consider myself a medical journalist? I don't think so. I don't have any formal journalism training. I'm certainly someone, I would say, kind of a healthcare influencer is how I like to term it. Okay. Someone who has an opinion, someone who shares stories, someone who does have a relatively large platform, but certainly nowhere near a huge mainstream CNN-backed platform. But I do think that there's a place for me because, as I mentioned before, I think a lot of the big mainstream platforms, they don't really tell the stories that need to be told. You watch a typical episode of Dr. Oz, he's not necessarily highlighting the stories of a practicing primary care doctor. He's pushing, whatever the story of the day is. He's pushing, in the past, a lot of pseudoscience. So these aren't things that really resonate with the practicing frontline clinician that I want to bring out. So I think that, like I said, there's not very many places that do what I do, and I certainly think that there's, as you can see, by the number of submissions I get, there's certainly a place for what I do.
I think definitely it's more grassroots, which makes it very authentic, in my opinion.
Absolutely, and that's certainly one of the goals is the. Like I mentioned, the op-ed pages of the New York Times. A lot of doctors, they go on there. They're polished writers. They have books and they work in high levels of academia, but they're not necessarily authentic voices who see patients every day. So I do think that there's always going to be a role for a place like Kevin MD, because I am going to share the voices. They may not have best-selling books. They may not be the most polished writers, but they have stories that need to be told and stories that need to be heard.
Now, can you compare and contrast the response that you've had from your colleagues when you first started Kevin MD to, where it is right now? What do your colleagues say in general?
So at first it was more, as I mentioned before, a more novel concept. Here was this doctor, he had a blog, and that was cute, and but now it's certainly evolved into a legitimate place where people can have influence. I think that there are a lot of authors on my site when they write a story with a provocative viewpoint. I have television producers, I have newspaper reporters contact me saying, hey, I want to get in touch with so-and-so doctor who wrote the story. I want to have them on this news program. I want to write about them. So there are a few doctors who have used my platform to vault themselves into more of the public consciousness. So I think that a social media platform like my site, and facilitated also by Twitter and Facebook, I think it's really brought a certain amount of prominence to these doctors, and now it's much more accepted by my colleagues. Now, is there any negative perception? Of course there's going to be some negative perception, because I write about controversial topics, and I do have a mission where I do want to bring out voices from across the political spectrum. So whenever you bring out pieces from across the political spectrum, you are going to have pushback from people who don't agree with that. So certainly I have a lot of dissenters on my site who don't agree with some of the posts I put, but that certainly comes with the territory of being in the public eye.
Now, I always ask this question to every guest that I have, and you could always tell me, hey, Nee, fall back a little bit. But in terms of how things are from a financial, monetary standpoint with Kevin MD versus what you do on a clinical standpoint, is there a major difference, or are you seeing pretty similar monetary gains as what you do in clinical practice? Do you ever see yourself kind of shifting more to doing everything on Kevin MD and moving away from clinical medicine?
Yeah, so let me answer that last question. So do I see myself going full-time in Kevin MD and moving away from clinical medicine? The answer probably is no. I do enjoy seeing patients. And I think that by still seeing patients 4 days a week, it gives me a certain amount of credibility as well to the other physicians who post to my site. So whenever I write an opinion piece talking about healthcare reform and some of the obstacles primary care doctors face, I'm speaking from the voice of a practicing primary care physician. So if I ever move away from seeing patients, I think I'm going to lose that credibility with my colleagues online.
I think that's a good point. That's a really good point.
So I do not see myself moving completely away from clinical medicine. I do think that Kevin MD offers me a balance. I think when I talk about burnout in my talks, I always say that one of the best ways to combat burnout is to have that passion that's outside of clinical medicine. Because if clinical medicine's your life and you're seeing patients every 10 to 15 minutes, I think you're going to get burnt out. And let's face it, patients deserve more than a frustrated doctor. And it's important to have a passion outside of clinical medicine. So for me, obviously, Kevin MD as well as speaking are my passions outside of clinical medicine. And it really gives me that balance and rejuvenates me by reading their stories, so I can really continue being a primary care doctor and continue seeing patients. And I don't want to be that full-time doctor that sees 30 to 40 patients a day and gets burnt out in 10 years. So I do think that by doing Kevin MD, by speaking across the country, it's giving me that balance so I can continue the clinical medicine part. So to answer the first part in terms of compensation, so I see myself professionally dividing my times into thirds. So I'm a third. 1/3 of my time is seeing patients, 1/3 of my time is doing Kevin MD, and 1/3 of my time is speaking. So in terms of compensation, it gets divided accordingly. So I would say 1/3 of my professional income is from Kevin MD, and also in terms of running the site, it's in the 5 figures. So I do have sponsors as well that helps run the site and helps me pay my technical team as well. So I guess that's the best answer I could give to that question.
I appreciate the answer. Now, when you mention sponsors, I know that there are other physicians who are starting blogs, other physicians who are doing YouTube channels, and just from watching the tech industry on YouTube and what they're doing with blogs, sometimes they talk about sponsors kind of twisting their arms or making them do things that they may not want to take the show in or talk about something different. Do you ever get that type of pressure from sponsors to maybe not put out a certain post or put out certain other posts? Do you ever get that type of pressure from sponsors?
No, I've been fortunate, and I can say no. I am partnered with MedPage today, and I have full editorial control on my site. Even if I have obviously pharma-based ads on my site, but I've never been pressured to take down negative posts on pharma. So I think that I've been lucky to be great partners with MedPage today, who have never pressured me from an editorial standpoint.
And you mentioned 2 questions ago, we talked about, or you mentioned the concept of being burnt out and burnt out physicians. And, I'm telling you, I think probably about 5 years ago, you couldn't find anything on the net about it. or maybe I just wasn't looking hard enough. But now it just seems as though, everywhere you go, particularly on your website and then even on other websites, the concept of burnt out physicians is very prevalent. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it's something that's going to get far worse before it gets better? Are we heading towards a tipping point? Is the lifestyle decisions that physicians are making now with being more employees or going into locums or going into direct primary care, is that going to be the solution? What are your thoughts on this whole burnt out process?
Well, I think that the recognition of burnout is much better now than it was 5 years ago. I think that, especially on my site, doctors are less afraid of speaking out and sharing their stories. They're not afraid of being vulnerable. I think that's one of the powers of social media. You have a doctor who's burnt out, and they read a story on my site about another doctor who is burnt out and thinking of quitting, and they think to myself, it's not only me. Other doctors are going through the same thing. There are other people in my boat as well. And I think that's tremendously important. We mentioned Pamela Weibel earlier, and she's done a tremendous amount in terms of bringing burnout and physician suicide to the forefront. She collects and publicizes stories. She's spoken out on TEDMed. And I think that it's tremendously important to get it out in the open and have doctors comfortable talking about it. And that's always the first step to a problem, right? Is that you want to have it and recognize as a problem first. Because if you look at some studies, it's almost half of physicians and medical students, they exhibit symptoms of burnout today. And it's important that they speak out about their experiences, because the only way to solve a problem is to have the various medical entities recognize it. So the question is certainly, what do we do about it? And of course, that's the $1 million question, right? So you're looking at some medical schools that certainly recognizing it. They have certainly wellness programs and things like that. I do think the ultimate solution is to just remove the triggers of burnout itself. Like, why are doctors burning out? I think are they too pressured to see more patients? Is it all the bureaucracy? Do they not have enough time with their families? And I think that as new physicians graduate, I think they do value the proverbial work-life balance more, and they are taking more jobs where they can spend more time at home at nights, where they can spend more time at home on the weekends. I think that it's important to make that a priority. Everyone talks about work-life balance, but I do think if you have that balance, then it actually helps you stay in medicine longer. Obviously, my family is very important to me, and I spend a lot of time raising my two young daughters. I do homework with them every night. I drive them to soccer practices on the weekends, and to me, that's tremendously important. Not only, of course, spending time with my family, but I think that having that passion, again, is that passion outside of clinical medicine. Having these passions outside of clinical medicine fuels your clinical medicine journey. It keeps you going in medicine longer. You contrast that with people who are 100% about medicine and burn out, and those are the type of doctors that aren't in medicine as long. So I think it's facing burnout head on and having these passions outside of medicine so you could fight it. I think it's tremendously important.
Yeah, love the answer. So we're getting towards the end of the interview, and I just want to ask you some quick, fast questions. You okay with that?
Absolutely.
All right. So what's one thing you want listeners to get from this podcast?
I think the one thing is that everyone, if they want to, they can be healthcare influencers. I think that if you look at what I did at Kevin MD, I started it on a free site, Blogger, and it's certainly evolved into a place where thousands of healthcare voices can tell their stories, and I share those stories on Facebook and Twitter and developed a following of tens of thousands, and they can all have a window into how healthcare is practiced today, and I've developed that and connected with mainstream media. I've spoken on stages across the country, and if someone like me can do it, I think so can all of your listeners. So can everyone else, because I'm certainly really nothing special. In medical school, I was average. I didn't honor many rotations. I didn't speak up much during rounds. I think I got to where I am because of the tools available to us. I got to where I am today because of social media. And of course, you got to have the drive to be heard and make a difference. So I think that all of us can influence healthcare, especially with the tools available to us. And if I can do it, so can anyone else.
Oh, I appreciate that answer. What can the audience expect from you in 5 years?
I don't see myself veering from my current trajectory. So I see me continuing building the platform, building the Kevin MD platform, and sharing more stories. And I think spotlighting issues that I think are important to frontline clinicians that often don't get reported anywhere else. So I think you're probably going to see me doing what I'm doing now in 5 years, maybe on a bigger scale.
Can't wait. Now, you explained that your professional life is split into thirds. So you got to give us a life hack that you're using right now to remain productive and to make sure things don't cross over into each other.
Sure. So I think the biggest life hack, ironically, is really you got to have the ability to say no. I think that
that's a good one right there.
As physicians, in training, in general, we're all at generally the top of our classes, all through our educational life. We are always conditioned that we can do anything, and we have done anything, and we're all generally, type A personalities. We say yes to everything, right? And even in practicing physician, we say yes to everything. And I think that it is important that whenever we have opportunities that don't align with our goals, we have to be comfortable with saying no. And I think that the biggest challenge I see physicians face, especially when it comes to things like healthcare reform and our changing healthcare landscape. That's why I don't think physicians have as strong as a voice as they should, because physicians in general have trouble saying no. So I think that's my biggest piece of advice that I can give from a productivity standpoint, because if you have problems saying no, you're going to be involved with all kinds of distractions that's going to prevent you from attaining your goals and becoming less productive. So you got to be able and be comfortable to say no.
I wanted to kind of expand on that thought right there. That's an excellent thought that I never thought about, but it was actually one of my earlier questions that I didn't get a chance to ask you. So the ability to say no, and obviously you connecting that with physicians not being taken seriously. What are things that doctors can do right now as a whole to get themselves taken more seriously when, we talk about things with health policy, health legislature?
Well, I think we should be able to be comfortable sharing our stories. And I think that when it comes to anything that makes our lives more difficult, when it comes to treating patients, we need to be able to say, hey, we're not going to take this anymore. And there are so many bureaucratic regulations. If you work in a hospital setting, you have a lot of hospital administrators. They say we have to do this and this and this because our patient satisfaction scores are down, and that influences how physicians care for patients. And if we have, if physicians stand up and say, we're not going to do this, and I think if we speak in a more unified voice, I think that we can get somewhere. I go to a lot of hospital meetings where these mandates are imposed on physicians, and there's a lot of complaining. Physicians are good at complaining. Physicians are good at saying, this is it. But when it comes to coordinated action, I think that we do need a more unified voice. And I think that if physicians can get on the same page, and that's of course a big if, because getting physicians on the same page, that's like a whole nother conversation. But I think that if physicians can't get on the same page and take some coordinated action to say no to some policies that hurt us when it comes to caring for patients, I think that we can have a bigger voice.
Knowing what you know now, let's say you get a chance to go back in time and give advice to yourself as a pre-med or even as medical student, Dr. Poe, what advice would you have given to yourself as a pre-med or even as a medical student?
I think that you don't have to be boxed in. I think your career course can change in a flash. When I was a pre-med and medical student, obviously I didn't expect my professional life to be where it is today. There was no, Kevin MD type person back then. And I think that what you imagine yourself practicing now as a student, it isn't necessarily the trajectory that you're going to be 20 years from now. So I think that, especially as physicians, we have options that are available to us that we may not even that we can't even conceive as we're going through training. So things will open up. Don't go in a straight line trajectory, and keep your mind open to every possibility in your professional life.
Love it. The last thing I'm going to ask you is actually a sentence that I ask all my guests. It's, I'm not just a doc, and it's an opportunity for my guests to just say something that they're very proud of or something that they do that's outside of the box. Some people have answered world traveler. Some people say doctorpreneur. Some people say boss. So Kevin MD, Dr. Kevin Poe, I present to you the sentence, I'm not just a doc, I'm a...
Sure, I'm not just a doc, I'm a healthcare influencer. And I share stories on kevinmd.com. I've made a difference in not only physicians' lives, but the lives of patients and hopefully healthcare decision makers as well.
Amazing answer. Dr. Kevin Poe, thank you so much for being on Docs Outside the Box. I think the audience learned a lot from what you have been doing. I'm really happy to have had you on the show. I've learned a lot from you. I'm really impressed with what you've been doing over the past, now it looks like 12 years now on the site, and I can't wait to see what else you have to do. So thank you so much for being on the show, and we got to do it again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for having me.
And that is it. It's a wrap. Episode 25 is history. That was a really good interview. Really awesome interview, actually. I really would like to know, as always, what you thought about the interview. If you like the interview, go ahead and tweet me at DocsOTB. That's D as in dog, OCSOTB. One thing you learned from that interview. Once again, if you like this interview, go ahead and tweet me at DocsOTB and let me know one thing you learned from this interview. Also, if there is someone who you think would benefit from this show, go ahead and share this episode with them. Remember, from whether it's your iPhone or whether you're using iTunes or even your favorite Android app or Android Google Play application, remember there is a way that you can share episodes with people either through Facebook, Twitter, or even by email. So if you know someone who's going to benefit from that, go ahead and use that option. Also, please, if you haven't done so already, leave me an iTunes review. There's a good chance that I'm going to get a chance to read your iTunes review on this show. And look, there's more great guests to come. I can't wait to produce them. I can't wait to get them out to you. But before I leave, remember, look, we only got one life, so let's make it count. And remember to live outside the box.